Hello, hi everyone. I hope you're well. Maybe this is going to become a Wednesday thing. That seems to be what's working so far, schedule-wise for me with the summer semesters. Um, hey, thanks for your wonderful work that you're doing so far. It's been a real joy to see all of your responses to the Florida project now, which is a tough one in very different ways than the graduate. It's like aggressive and bleak and many things. But you seem to have seen the importance of that bleakness and its contrasting levity in the perspective of kids. Um, it's quite beautiful. And last week in the video update, I talked about how the ending is really polarizing and is for me. I historically have not been a big fan of the, and by the ending I just mean that final sequence when Mooney and Jancy run through Disney, and it's shot on the iPhone. It's historically been for me too much of a shift visually and in terms of narrative, but reading some of your responses has, I think, actually pretty much convinced me of its importance. Some of you are articulating really well that it's Mooney's movie, not Haley's, and that's important. Um, anyway, yeah, you've convinced me. I think I now like the visually arresting ending, I guess, of the Florida Project. But we're on to Before Sunrise, and it's quite different. Linklater is obviously a really different director than Sean Baker and Mike Nichols. All quite different from one another, and I try to do that in this course generally. Um, I don't think you're, while I think they are tonally sort of like floating in the same universe, and I've tried to pick films that I think work together in a holistic sense. They're all really different, and the directors are really different. Um, I'm also trying to create a wide breadth of intention and things like that. So yeah, thanks for playing along because it's a little whiplashy to go from one film to the next when you're going from the Florida project to Before Sunrise. Okay, so before I jump into Before Sunrise, just talking about it a little bit as I do, what I want to say is about the essay component of the course. So over the course of the 8 weeks that we have together, you'll write an essay that'll end up in that page range, like 8-ish pages, because you'll have about a week to write each page. But that said, I'm actually not overly concerned about length because I think you're gonna. I hope that you'll approach this one creatively. So I've posted some examples in the update this week that I would like you to take a look at if you haven't already, because they are all quite different from one another. Some are far more traditional. It's just like a personal narrative essay that says, sometimes I felt on the outside of my own version of Disney World, like Mooney did when I was growing up. You know what I mean? And that's fine. That's fine. But I also want you to feel free to get experimental and like render your story as a scene in a film or visually, cinematically, that sort of thing. So don't be afraid to get creative and get strange. But at the end of the day, it's personal narrative, a story from your life that is significant for you and for one reason or another, because it was hard or very happy or somewhere in between or whatever. It doesn't really matter to me as long as it was significant for you and that you're rendering it as cinematically as possible, in small part by juxtaposing against some of the films we've watched in class or some media that you've watched outside of class. I've had folks really do like a consistent focus throughout the paper on like one text, and the others are just sort of like supplemental. But that one text, in the past, for some students, has been something we didn't watch in class. It's a TV show or a movie that they feel really passionately about. That's fine too. You're more than welcome to bring in outside sources. I do want you by the end to cite some of the movies we've watched in class, but it's okay if even if your focus is on as was the case last time I taught this, a Norwegian crime thriller series that I had never seen. It was really cool the way the person did it. So get creative. Take it in any direction you want. I'm gonna be here every week to give you my thoughts, and we'll guide it. toward something. So don't stress that you don't know what you're doing, because A, you do, and B, even if you were like way off the mark, I'll help you figure it out. Okay. All right. So enough about that, because I want to talk. I don't want to be super long in these videos because then nobody watches them, and I want to talk about Before Sunrise, just lecture about it a little bit because I love this film. You can probably infer, I suppose, that I love all of the films in this course that we work with, but there's like a really special place in my heart for whatever reason for Before Sunrise. Um, it's Linklater. Richard Linklater is the director and the writer. And then it's actually part of a trilogy. Sorry, that's my dog in the background. It wasn't planned to be serialized, but it became this thing. Joey, come here. Sorry, I'm like, this is lecturing from home in real time. Um, it became this planned thing, or this sort of unplanned thing, in the very Linklater way. So if you know his other films, you know, like Boyhood, which is a film that was shot over the course of like 20 years. And likewise, the sequels to Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight both take place about 10 years after the other. So it spans like again, like 20 years of shooting or more than that. And it tracks, I don't want to be like spoilery, but it tracks Jesse and Celine over the course of that period of time, in their relationship. But it wasn't intended to be that. There are interviews with Richard Linklater after Before Sunrise came out, asking him the question of, do you think if you've watched it, you'll know this in the end, but they make a plan to come back to see each other in Europe at a certain date and time. And they ask Richard Linklater, do you think they did that? And he gives answers to that question as if he never planned on making more films. But this is what he does. As a director, he plays with time, like temporality. You can see in this film that it's essentially, I know it's not one long continuous take, but it sort of feels that way, right? It feels like in real time, we're watching a singular conversation in a singular space between these two people evolve into something pretty special. That's what's so cool about Before Sunrise for me, is the temporality functions more for narrative and less as a gag. I think sometimes people do this for the sake of it. I think it's serving something here. Because we come to believe the relationship between Jesse and Celine, in no small part because we've seen pretty much every word of it evolve. You don't get that in a lot of films. You sort of have to suspend disbelief and grant narrative the grace to say, like, well, it developed, I just didn't see it happen in a lot of films. Here you see, almost every word of their relationship develop, and I think we believe it more because of that in the end. So yeah, that's Linklater, and that's what he's doing with temporality. Interesting in your reading is to consider framing in this thing. Do you remember it talking about rectangles being entrance, being exit? Roland Barthes talks about this in Camera Lucida too. So does Gaston Bachelard in The Poetics of Space. But I want you to consider in a film that is so much about like going into spaces and leaving spaces, whether they're trains or chapels or restaurants or whatever, how much we're framing entrance and exit as opposed to framing character within them. It's quite interesting. There are lots of close-up shots on Jesse and Celine in this. A really, really famous one where they're in the record store listening to the record, and we kind of see them like literally fall in love before our eyes. And there are also lots of sequences in this film that are like huge landscapes and towering buildings that dwarf them and make it feel like they're in a place that they probably aren't going to get out of. What does that do for us? The notion of like close up in space versus shooting exterior, the entrance and exit, and them coming and going from it. What does that do for us in terms of intimacy versus distance and believing in this thing? Because it's hard to believe. You know, we're all adults here. We've had our relationships in the past. We know what it's like to be in a honeymoon phase after 24 hours with somebody and think, oh, I'm gonna marry this person. You know, I'm all in. And how naive that is. So is that what Before Sunrise is doing? Is it showing us that just in an authentic way, and so we cry a little bit at the end, knowing that it can't work, or do we kind of believe it, in no small part because of the framing? Do we believe that this is a little different from that? These two are transcending the stereotype, or something. Um, Now there are, like I said, two other movies you could watch before sunset and before midnight to answer those questions. But the truth is, although I think those movies are great in their own way, there's a version of my life where I sort of just wish I had only ever watched Before Sunrise, uh, because it's by far the most hopeful. Um, Before Midnight, in fact, is pretty devastating. Uh, and so I don't know. Do with that what you will. Yeah, be tempted by Before Sunset and Before Midnight, but know that there's definitely a place for people in the world who only want to watch Before Sunrise because you're the hopeful, optimistic romantics, and you love love. That's what's so cool about this film for me. Um, it's not doing much other than that, is it? Uh, there's that. I'm primarily a Dickinson scholar in my doctoral work. I'm a Dickinson researcher, and she has that very famous thing where she says that love is all there is all we know of love, which is gospel to me, and I think works really well in this Linklater context. Like Jesse and Celine know literally nothing about love, but they do know that it's the most important thing. Um, that's if that's not the takeaway from the film, I'm not sure what is. So anyway, if you haven't watched it yet, then go into it looking for what I'm talking about in terms of entrance, exit, framing things in a huge way versus framing things close up, and what does that do for us in terms of rendering intimacy or not? And if you have already watched it, maybe go back and look a couple scenes and reconsider that. Food for thought. And now you know a little bit about Richard Linklater and his other films. But yeah, where Sean Baker, the director of the Florida Project, where I talked about this, he's always his work is always about sex workers. His films are always about sex workers. Linklater's are almost always about temporality or like revisiting something from the past, with maybe a couple of exceptions. But I think that's pretty much universally true. Um, and for what it's worth, they're not credited, but Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke, who play Celine and Jesse, wrote a lot of this movie with Linklater, like sort of in the process of filming it, and they're not credited. But in Before Sunset and Before Midnight, they are. They're both credited as writers. Um, so that's interesting too. That they like had a real investment and development in and of these characters. Yeah. Okay, that's enough. Thanks everyone. I hope you like Before Sunrise. It's not gonna be for everyone. None of these films are gonna be for everyone, but I hope you find a few here and there that really really resonate with you, as they do for me. Okay, thanks, and we'll talk soon.